Hey guys, welcome back to Break the Code. So far, you've created variables, written functions, and worked with arrays. But what if you want to repeat something for every item in an array? That's where loops come in, and they're a game changer. So what is a loop? A loop is like saying, do this thing over and over again until I say stop. For example, show every item in a shopping list, add points for each player, or send messages to a group of users. Let me quickly illustrate this with this example here. Here we have the numbers array, which contains 10 numbers, from 1 to 10. Now imagine we just want to run this code, which is to console log each item in the array. So we would have to do this 10 times, starting with 1, 2, all the way to 10. So obviously, this is not scalable. We need a better way for doing this, and that's where loops come in. So what a loop does, it actually loops through the items in an array and does the specific thing. So it triggers the code that we want to run, which in this case is console log. This is what we actually want to do in this case, but we want to write it once, and we want the loop to take care of finding those items in the array and console logging the items by going through the loop. So the loop has to run a number of times to achieve what we want. It has to run 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, all the way to 10 if we wanted it to console log the numbers from 1 to 10. So remember here, let me just add the index of each item so that it becomes clearer what's actually going on here. Okay, so I've added the index of each item in the array, and remember arrays are 0 indexed. So the item 1, the number 1 in the array, is at location 0 in the array. This is the 0 index. The item 2 in the array is at location 1 in the array, so this is the index 1. So here again, at index number 0, we have the number 1. At index number 1, we have the number 2. At index number 2, we have the number 3, until we reach the end of the array, which ends in 9 because it started at 0. But if you count them, they are equal to 10. So this is equal to 10, and this is equal to 10. So what we're doing here again with this code, console log numbers I. So I here is the index. It represents these ones here, okay? And it's saying, go through the array and stop at every index and tell me what is the item in the array on that index, okay? So in the first round, or in the first loop, when I here was 0, the item was here 1. So it's gonna console log 1. This is the first loop finished. Then it moves to the second loop, this one here. I now is 1. So this is the index. What is the item in location 1 in the array is the number 2. I mean, this is a number right now. It could be a string, could be anything. Now the second loop has finished. So now it moves to the third loop. In the third loop, the index is now 2. And what is the item at index 2 in the array? Well, it's the number 3. So on and so forth until the loop ends at 9. So here, this is when the loop ends, or it should end, because if it doesn't end, you're going to end up with something called infinite loop, which is very, very bad. So you have to always learn how to stop the loop from running when it has finished looping through all the items in the array, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. Okay, so let's have a look at how to do this in JavaScript using the first type of loops, which is the classic for loop. So we start by declaring a variable called scores, and we assign it a few numbers, 85, 92, and 78. So this is our scores array. And now the way you write it is you say for, and then open parentheses, let I stands here for the index, equal 0, semicolon, where I is less than the length of the array. So how do we do that? So it's scores.length. So that's the length of the array. And then we want to do I++, and I'll explain that in a moment. And then let's console log. Okay, you want to console log the score. Okay, and then we want the array at position I. And let's also console log the index, which is I. Okay, so what's going on here? So we have an array called scores, which at the moment contains 3 items, 3 numbers. So scores.length, which is the length of the array, is currently 3. And we start the for loop, we say for, then open parentheses, then we say let I, which is the index, equal 0. So we're setting the index to 0 in the beginning. Why? Well, because we want the first element in the array. So we want to start here on the first element in the array. So that's why we have 0. Then semicolon, and we're saying as long as I is less than scores.length, which means as long as I, this index, is less than 3, then semicolon, then I++. I++ means take I and then makes it equals to I plus 1. So in the first loop, I is 0. So scores I means scores 0, which means this one, the 85, which means this one, the 85, and I0, the index, here. So basically, in the first loop, we get score 85 because I is 0, so it's referring to this one here. Remember, 0, 1, 2. And then index is 0. Before we start the second loop, I is increased by 1 because it started at 0 and we're saying I++, which means I equals I plus 1s, which means I equals, or the new I equals 0 plus 1, which means 1. So before the second loop, or in the second loop, I is now 1. So again, you start the second loop at I equals 1. So index 1 and scores 1 will refer to 92. So that's why in the second loop, we have score 92 and the index is 1. And now before the third loop, I has been increased by another 1. So I is now equals 2. So when we start the third loop, I equals 2. So when I equals 2, the score is scores I. So here, replace I with 2. Replace I with 2, you're going to get 78 because this is 0, this is 1, this is 2. And the index, again, here is 2. And now, I is again increased by another 1. So now I is no longer 2, I is 3. But we don't see anything printing anymore on the screen. We don't see any console logs anymore. Why is that? Well, that's very important, and that is because of this condition here. Okay, and because we're incrementing the I like that. Because we said that keep going as long as I is less than 3. But remember, when we're here and we're trying to go into the fourth loop, well, it won't because I now equals 3 and 3 is not less than 3. 2 is less than 3, but 3 is not less than 3. And we didn't say here less than or equal. We said less than. And that's why the loop stops. So in other words, in the fourth check, while it's trying to run a fourth loop, it's looking at I is now 3, and 3 less than scores.length returns false because 3 is not less than 3, since scores.length is 3, and that's why the loop stops. And that's very important, because if you don't do that, then you're going to end up with an infinite loop, which means the code is going to keep running and running and running, and it will never stop. And you can imagine, if you're running this in a browser, the browser is going to freeze, and sometimes even the computer might freeze as a result of that. So very, very important to remember not to enter into an infinite loop. And the way to do that is to always remember that you have the I less than the length of the array, and to increment I at the end of each loop. Now, before moving any further, we have been using let so far to declare variables. But if you remember, in the very first episode, I said that there are 3 ways to declare variables in JavaScript. There's var, let, and const. So I want to briefly explain the differences between them. Var is used only in old code. It's not used anymore, and it's not advised to use it anymore. So with var, you can change its value and you can redeclare it. So if we have, for example, var name here, and let's say James, if we console log the name, we're gonna get, okay, what did we do wrong here? Oh, okay. Console log name, we're gonna get James. But we can go like this also. So we take the variable name and now we assign it something else. So let's say we assign it Sarah. So now it has changed. It's no longer James, now it's Sarah. And actually I can even declare it again. I can redeclare it and say var name equal Peter. And now name is Peter. Okay, so this is outdated, so avoid using it in modern code, but you will still see it in very old code. Okay, now let's comment this out and talk about let, the one we have been using so far the most. So with let, again, we declare, for example, a variable, let age equals 25. Let's console log the age, so we get 25. But with let, we can change its value, but we cannot redeclare it in the same scope. So let's change its value. So now we say age equals 26. So initially we assigned the value 25 to age, and here we're saying, well, now let's change it. Let's assign another value to it, 26. And we see that it has changed to 26. But let's try to declare it again. Okay, let's say let age equals 30. Okay, so now we're getting an error. And it's telling us basically that the identifier age has already been declared because we have already declared it here. We cannot declare it here again. While here, remember, with var, we were allowed to do that, which is why it can cause issues. So here, we don't want to do that. Okay, so let's comment this out. And let's move to the one which is actually used the most these days, which is the const. And that's for values that never change. So, for example, if you have const pi equals 3.14. Now, let's try to change it. Let's say pi is actually 3.14159, and we're gonna get a type error, assignment to constant variable. So because we set const pi, the value here of pi cannot change this way. We cannot then go and assign it a new value. It's a constant. So if we console log pi, okay, let's comment this out. So pi is 314. Let's try to redeclare it. So const pi equals 3.1489. So again here, we cannot do that. It's saying that the identifier pi has already been declared. So this we cannot do, and this we cannot do. So what are the main differences between these 3 types of variable declarations? With var, you can change its value and you can redeclare it. So only use it when working with old code. With let, you can change its value, but you cannot redeclare it. So the value here may change. With const, you cannot change its value and you cannot redeclare it. So the value should never change in this case. Okay, let's now comment everything out to clear the console. And let's move to the friendlier version of the for loop, which is the for of loop. So let's declare a variable called names and assign it the following array with the following strings, Lena and Alex and then James. Okay, and then similar to the previous loop, we start by saying for and then open parentheses. But here we don't have to say let I equal 0 and then I less than the array dot length then I plus plus. Here all you have to say is for let name of names. This is why it's called the for of loop. This is the for here of loop, and then let's execute the following code between the curly brackets, which in this case we simply want to console log hello and then name. So we see here we have hello Lena, hello Alex, hello James. Here name could be anything. You could say item, but then you have to change this one also, otherwise you get undefined. So you can call this anything you want, because all this is referring to the items in the array, these items here. So we've got the array names, which we know that it's got a length of 3 because it's got 3 items at the moment. So if you console log names.length, you're going to get 3. So it's going to loop 3 times, in other words, and it's going to stop automatically. Unlike the previous for loop where we had to increment I and tell it, give it a condition to only keep running as long as I is less than the array.length or the length of the array. Here, JavaScript handles this for us automatically, so we don't need to worry about that. Okay, but I'm gonna call it name instead. Since we are dealing with an array that is called names, it makes sense that each item in the array is referring to a name. So this is a name, this is another one, this is another one. So that's why I'm calling it name. So as you can see, this does the same thing as the previous for loop, but it reads more naturally. So use the for of when you just want the value, not the index, because if you also wanted the index to console log it or use it in any way in the code, you have to use the other for loop. Okay, so let's comment this code out and talk about looping with conditionals. So you can mix loops with if statements as well to do smart things based on conditions. For example, let's declare a variable, let numbers equal and assign it the following numbers 5, 10, 15, and 20. Then we start a for of loop by saying for let num as in number of the array numbers, then open curly brackets, and what we want to say here. So here we want an if statement. We want to say if the num, the item in the array, is greater than 10, then I want you to do something. In this case, I want you to console log the num, then concatenate, and then leave some space here, is greater than 10. So here we have a conditional, an if statement, inside a for of loop. And we're looking at each number in the numbers array, each one of those, we're looking at them, and we are checking if this number is greater than 10. So the first time is 5 greater than 10? Well, no, so it's gonna get ignored. Is 10 greater than 10? No, 10 equals 10, so it's gonna get ignored. Is 15 greater than 10? Yes. So now this code here gets triggered. This gets triggered and we see here 15 is greater than 10. and then it moves to the next item in the array, which is 20, and it checks if the number we're referring to here, the item 20, is greater than 10. Yes, then this is going to trigger again. It's going to take this num, which at the moment is 20, and it's going to say 20 is greater than 10. And that's why we see here 20 is greater than 10. Okay, now let's comment this out and move to the last item in this episode, which is the practice exercise. So I'd like you to create an array called pets with 4 animal names, then use a for of loop to greet each pet, and lastly, inside the loop, if the pet is a dog, log a special message like who's a good boy. Okay, pause this video now, have a go at it, and come back for the solution. Okay, so here's an example of a solution. So we're gonna declare a variable called pets and assign it the array with the following pet types. So cat, dog, rabbit, and parrot. This has to be comma, parrot. Then we want to start a for of loop. So how do we do that? For parentheses, let pet of pets, then open curly brackets. Then we want to console log. Okay. Hello. Okay. Then concatenate the pet. And inside here, what we want to do is we want to have an if statement. We want to say if the pet equals, and here we use equals 3 equals. We're not assigning here. Here we're checking if it's equal the type and the value. So pet equals dog. Then do something or execute the following code, which in this case we want to console log. Okay, who's a good boy? Okay, so now to recap, we created an array called pets with 4 animal names, cat, dog, rabbit, and parrot. Then we used a for of loop to greet each pet. So here we use the for of loop for let pet of pets, and then between brackets, we ran console log hello concatenate pet. So pet in this case will refer to each type, cat, dog, rabbit, parrot. That's why we see hello cat, hello dog, hello rabbit, and hello parrot. Then in the same for loop here, inside it, we have an if statement. We're saying if pet equals dog, and here again we use equal because we are not assigning. Here we are comparing the type and value of the item in the array. So in the first instance, the first loop, pet is cat, the string cat. Is string cat equal the string dog? Well, no. But is the string dog equal the string dog? Then yes. So this is going to return true. In this case, was going to print out who's a good boy in the console. So if we change that to tiger, well, this piece of code here will not get executed because this condition is going to return false at the moment because we don't have any dog in the pets array. So well done, guys. That's it for this episode. Now you know how to use for and for of loops to repeat actions in your code, which is incredibly useful. In the next episode, we'll explore objects, a new way to group related data together, kind of like real-world items with properties. If this episode helped you, drop a like and subscribe to keep learning with me. See you next time.